empty the chamber on them. And how do you do that? We're 6 seconds, point A to point B, everything you got. Everything you got. Turn that shit up. Let's go.
Welcome to the Scoop World Order Superstar Defensive End Edition. We had, in my opinion, the best defensive end in the country in town this weekend. It looks like there's a really good shot that he's going to be an Ohio State Buckeye, so we're going to get into that a little bit. We have just been absolutely exploding on the scene. SWO is the highest rated, most downloaded Ohio State podcast on YouTube now. It's official, so thank you all for making us number one. Without you guys, honestly, none of this is possible. So thank you so much for liking the content is huge. Leaving us comments is huge. Obviously, subscribing to the channel is huge. Recommending it to your friends is huge. We really try to put forth a great product that's educational. You guys learn something about college football, learn something about what goes on behind the scenes, some of the best inside information, some of the funniest stories. We really try to break down some good film for you guys. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. I love the feedback. Thank you guys so much. Again, we're here to have fun. Want you to learn a little bit of stuff and just have a good time. So thank you so much. And again, if you love this content, give it a like, because those likes drive views, and we are absolutely crushing it. We went over 40,000 views on our last video, highest that this industry has seen this time of the year in a long time. So thank you so much. Appreciate you guys. So with that, I'm going to bring in Mr. Nevada. Nevada, how are you tonight?
Doing great. Doing good. A big official visit this weekend, and lots of things happening around Ohio State.
Yeah, and we're going to get right into that because we're going to talk a little bit about official visits, because I don't think everybody knows what an official visit is. So we had Matayo Uiagalelei in. He is, in my opinion, the best defensive end in the country. Second straight. We had JT, we got Matayo, two kids from the West Coast, two kids that are absolute phenoms, genetic superstars. Nevada, your thoughts on Matayo? Obviously, we're both really high on him. What would he mean if he committed to the 2023 Ohio State class?
Well, it would mean that the Polynesian connection is alive and well for Ohio State. And, that's been something that Ohio State's been working on really, really hard. And, we've talked about this before. Where do you go to get defensive linemen? The defensive lineman is almost exclusively the domain of the Deep South. And on the West Coast teams have all done it with Polynesian kids. And, Ohio State's starting to really cultivate that, really kind of make that a area of emphasis for them. And then Matayo would be another in a long line of that. And that would mean the Polynesian pipeline is alive and well and thriving in Columbus.
Yeah, and there are some absolute phenoms that fit that mold. Haloti Ngata went to Oregon. USC had some Philly Morales, some unbelievable Polynesian defensive linemen. And, I love the fact that we got JT Tuimoloau last year. If we add Matayo to that mix, we have arguably two top number one overall defensive ends, back-to-back classes. I think that would be outstanding. Obviously, Big Dave is a huge he's a character. He's a great dude. It's really interesting. They're not really, Clemson is not in on this one, even though his other son goes there. So that's somewhat interesting. But, I think Larry Johnson is doing a great job on this thing. I think Rand Day doing a great thing. And, it's like when you have a kid like JT Tuimoloau who starts as a freshman, is going to be a force this year. I think this year he's going to have a huge jump in production just based on comfort, being in the weight room. He missed all summer conditioning last year, and he still was able to start as a freshman, which is unbelievable. So I think it's going to be a big jump from him. But on the topic of official visits, so Big Dave was awesome in documenting kind of everything that was going on in an official visit. Nevada, what have you heard? You've been around the program for decades. You know a lot about these official visits. You know a lot about official visits at other schools. Tell me a little bit about what you know about official visits. Maybe distinguish a little bit between an unofficial and official, because I'm not sure if everybody knows the difference. There's a pretty substantial difference, but what do you know about official visits and how Ohio State handles things?
Well, official visits basically are structured. They're structured by the amount of time that you can spend. They're structured by who's paying for what. Unofficial visits on your dime, but official visits on the school's dime, and that's the biggest really difference between an official and unofficial visit. And Ohio State, it used to be kind of the wild, wild west with these official visits. You had the great story with the legendary official visits that were documented Willie Williams. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more, in the future, maybe even later in this podcast. But Ohio State's gotten more and more refined as they've gone after these official visits. They're spending a little bit of time finding out, about the kids, doing the little things like, it's like the old story about the rock stars with the particular types of M&Ms they like in their green rooms and things like that. I mean, Ohio State's going to that type of length in these official visits because, it's their one chance to put their best foot forward, really show that they really care, that they really know about the kid, that they really know about his parents, that they're really invested in him as a person. And I got to give Ohio State credit. Ohio State's gotten a lot better at this. They've increased the budget substantially. Transportation used to be like they'd pick up guys at the airport and stuff like that, and now everything's limos and first, it's first class all the way, and that's great. I think Ohio State official visit definitely takes a backseat to no one. So I think Ohio State's doing a really good job in that regard.
Yeah, it's they've really ratcheted it up. I remember specifically when my mom went on my official visit in 2003, they used to go to Morton's downtown. Now they go to Hyde Park. They get a private room. The menu is basically whatever you want. So, the parents, it's a little different on a Saturday night because, the parents kind of split off with the coaches. The players go off with the players that are on the team. So, they're eating, we used to go to Buckeye Hall of Fame Cafe where they had arcade games and we'd eat nachos and French fries, chicken tenders, that kind of thing. And the parents would split off and go eat, steaks. They'd go to, more like a Morton's or like you see Big Dave's at Hyde Park, so they sit down, they got they got cocktails, they got you see the seafood tower, they got filet mignon. It's really pricey. And honestly for these coaches, man, it's the time where you're really you gotta make sure you stay on the scale because you can gain some poundage in a quick way because you're doing this every single weekend, multiple great meals. Big Dave was documenting the breakfast buffet and how gigantic it is and how they roll out the red carpet, but these guys are doing it every weekend, man. So right before they go on vacation, I'm sure they're trying to walk on the treadmill and burn some of that off. But they're really fun. I think that something that has kind of killed the camp scene is the June official visits, because if you're a kid like Mateo, you can come into Ohio State and have Ohio State pay for it. But the only downside to an official visit for Ohio State is the kid cannot work out legally on an official visit. So if the kid wants to show up a day early and work out at a camp before the visit starts, that is legal. But once, they're on that 48-hour, Ohio State pays for everything plan, there's no more working out. So that is it's been a seismic change because honestly, the talent at the camps has been pretty lackluster thus far. Not a lot of 5 stars, not a lot of major kids coming from the South because, a lot of these kids, given how expensive, flights are and gas is for driving and everything, if Ohio State can pay for it, they'd rather pay for it. And, only seniors are eligible for official visits. So if you're not a senior, you have to take it unofficial. You have to pay your own way. But, right now times are kind of tough because the economy's nuts and gas is expensive. So I think that might be affecting some of our camp attendance because it's just been, in terms of the quality of the top tier guys, it's been way down compared to last year. So you mentioned Willie Williams. So some of the changes and some of you recruiting veterans that have been on the scene for a long time remember Willie Williams. He was a 2004 kid. He's a year younger than I was. And he was the first celebrity recruit. Nevada, do you remember Willie Williams down from Miami?
Oh yeah. I mean, that was our recruiting story for the ages. And that, I think that had an impact that, I think there was some direct results where the NCAA actually stepped in and changed some rules on official visits directly because of Willie. I mean, he was that legendary.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't remember, Willie was 5-star, number 1 linebacker in the country, probably top 5 player in the country. Came down to Florida, Florida State, Miami, the major players. And he did a recruiting documentary with a local newspaper where they would interview him after these visits. And I can't even imagine being the reporter who's writing down these incredible stories. Like, when he got busted at Florida for, exhausting a fire extinguisher in the hotel. And, he was out drinking. Channing Crowder was his host and Channing was nuts. I played with him in the NFL, they go out and they get these kids, pretty drunk, pretty hammered. and then he's getting in fights, and a guy didn't want to go to the club, so he emptied out the fire extinguisher, and then the stuff's all over the ground, the stuff that comes out of the fire extinguisher, and then you see like footprints into his room, and they get a knock on the door from the manager, and they're like, "Sir, did you empty the fire extinguisher?" And he said no, and then they get security and they come in the room, and they see like his footprints that lead right into the room through the foam, and then they look in the bathtub and there's an empty fire extinguisher, but it's just like, then he goes to Miami, which is where he ultimately picked his hometown, and it was just kind of like the world's first view. I mean, people kind of knew what an official visit was, but Willie was incredibly detailed at kind of the opulence of it, and some of the insanity of it, and how he's like, I went to this restaurant and I ordered 5 filet mignons and 5 lobster tails, and it was all market price. The highest, most expensive restaurant in Miami that they were taking the recruits to, and then they went to bet. It was it was a club, the hottest club in Miami, and I mean, so you see kind of the he's out at this club with with players and stuff. Those clubs in Miami, they cost $10,000 for a table or whatever it is, and it's like, who's paying for that? How's that getting scored? There's all these kind of fringe things that can happen on official visits, and I think that really caused the NCAA to crack down on things in terms of what you can do, what you can't do, what you can pay for, what you can't pay for. And I think some people probably had their feelings hurt when they found out they can't go to Club Live or Story or some of these nightclubs on on whoever's paying for its dime. Because when it's done in the dark, it's not a big deal, but when Willie Williams kind of outs the whole thing, it kind of ruins all the fun for everybody. So I think you're right. I think the NCAA made some pretty drastic changes on that. But yeah, and then I took a quote here from Urban, because it was interesting because, in the last 3 or 4 years, they've added the fact that you can do June official visits. This was never a thing before. Previously, official visits were only from September to basically February, the old National Signing Day. Talk a little bit about that, because Urban talked about how much he hated the June official visits, because it eats up every single weekend you have in June. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because you can knock out a lot of these recruited kids like Luke Montgomery and their official visits, right now, as opposed to doing them in the season. But it eats up your summers. If your kid's playing t-ball or baseball and you got to go eat at Hyde Park, Friday and Saturday every single weekend in June, it kind of gets sold. Nevada, give me your thoughts on having June official visits. Does it benefit Ohio State? Does it hurt Ohio State? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think for Ohio State, I've always maintained that one of the biggest things for Ohio State is the game day experience. The game day experience in the Horseshoe is second to none. So not having that, I think, is that's certainly a minus. And no matter how many times you bring them in and talk to them there, you just can't really kind of match the magic of a game day. So I think from that standpoint, it hurts. But I also know logistically, it's a major pain to host these kids when you're preparing for a big game, and heaven forbid if you lose, that changes everything as well. But my big question in terms of the changes on these visits and everything that's going on is and this is something that we really haven't talked about much, but is NIL. And there's rules against, just giving you a gift. There's rules against private plane travel for these kids on official visits. But what if they had an NIL deal from Columbus Air or whatever that gave them free, private plane usage to fly into Columbus for their official visit? How would that be a violation of NCAA rules? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, that's part of the gray area, because if there's a high school, if there's, say, Texas or Florida or some state passes NIL, and you got to deal with NetJets, and they say, hey, we'll give you 20 hours a year to fly, and you can fly, to Ohio in 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it takes to get from Dallas. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's against the NCAA rules, because that's the great unknown. With these guys that can, if they get a $3 million deal, they can actually afford to. If they don't take a private jet once or twice, you don't do it every time, but I mean, they could actually afford to do it. And that's kind of the great unknown is, if you want to upgrade your thing, because you could say, hey, I'll just take my mileage check instead of flying or whatever. And, I know, parents that did that. I know parents that take the mileage because it was more with the gas prices, and then they book their flights with points. And, there's some creative ways to do things, but I think that's a fascinating question, and what if teams start using a private jet just because they have the money for it. They have an NIL deal, or they have it donated to, like, again, I think that that's regulated, but that's like where it gets blurry, because if you have a donor that owns NetJets and all of a sudden, he donates, he signs, the number one quarterback in the country to a NetJet deal, and he goes and picks him up, and he signs him in high school, then how does that work? That's why this stuff's all fascinating and new to me. I mean, where do you think that could go, Nevada?
Well, I mean, just think about it this way: if the OSU collective arranged the deal directly for Mateo, not a general deal for NetJets, but directly with whomever, that said, Mateo, we want to use your name, image, and likeness, and we'll donate to you a private jet that'll take you from Los Angeles to Columbus and back.
Yeah.
Again, how do you get around that? And how does the NCAA fight that? And I guarantee you, if that can be done, or there's ways to do it, then schools like Alabama are going to start doing it, because they've always been leading edge on that. They're going to be leading edge on that. And I just think NIL opens up a whole another dimension to these, what you can do and what you can't do on an official visit. And I think, it's the more things change, the more they say the same. We talked about how Willie Williams kind of took the excess out of these official visits. Well, I think NIL is going to put the excess back into these official visits, and it's going to get even crazier in the future. And I'll just remember this conversation the next time something really wild happens on official visits, because it's going to be NIL related. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you get an NIL deal with a nightclub in Miami and they give you free bottles of champagne or something, like, or they, some bar, whatever. There's just a million ways to do things. It's like, Lane Kiffin, 2 weeks ago was picking kids up at the airport in a brand new Rolls Royce, a Phantom. So it's like, it's a $450,000 car that he's driving up, and when I went on my visits to Ohio State, we were in like conversion vans. Like, I mean, literally we got picked up in like a conversion van. Like, it was like not the opulence. And Willie Williams getting picked up a new Escalade, and so like, how can you tweak it where you stay inside the lines, but you're coloring a little bit different, like a lot of these schools do? Well, I'm going to move to the edge. I talk a little bit about Ohio State's edge on these visits and how they've gotten so good. So I'm going to play a little clip from Ryan Day. The audio is just okay, so I apologize to the audience, but I'm going to play this real quick, and then we're going to come back and talk a little about their edge.
So what happened was, they came to the community and the ability to raise $600,000 to build Buckeye Stadium. 100 years ago, they raised $600 million, and then that was the beginning of Ohio Stadium. So you see this thing is shaped like a horseshoe, and it's called a horseshoe. That's the nickname of it. And then over time, it was built at the second level, and then we closed off the end zone. So now you can fit about 107,000 people here in Ohio Stadium. And so you can imagine what place is like during game day. That first game, next time we're all back together, will be, like Keenan talked about, 8 o'clock against Notre Dame. So they're going to have all day to get juiced up and excited and ready to roll. It's going to be an amazing atmosphere. Told some people that scalping tickets somewhere down here are probably about $3,000 to $4,000 right now. Let's sell out with some of the other scalping websites. So it's an exciting time, certainly in Ohio State football, but
And that's, it's interesting because they're at the new suite area. That's where they have the brunch, and they kind of lead him out there and have him sit and see the stadium. And he name drops the fact that some of these are $3,000 to $4,000 tickets. So a lot of these guys are probably going to be wanting to take, come back for that game for an unofficial visit, get free tickets. But, talk a little bit about Ohio State's edge and how they've gotten so good at official visits, Nevada.
Well, the biggest thing has been that, when Urban Meyer came in, Urban Meyer demanded that they spend more money on this. I mean, I think they took the budget up almost 500% on what they're spending on these official visits. And then when Ryan Day came in, he asked for more, and they gave it to him. So I just think that Ohio State's really putting the resources behind these visits. They've got guys that are working as researchers that are researching the interests of the kid, researching the interests of the parents, the interests of the family. So they're really trying to tailor these official visits to be really, really personal, from things like finding, specific snack food from the islands for Mateo's dad, for Big Dave, and different, all sorts of little things that they're doing right now that are really trying to create an edge for Ohio State. And I think, for years I've been critical of Ohio State in terms of culturally. I haven't felt that they've done enough to be competitive with the big boys. This is one area where they've definitely stepped it up, and they're as competitive with anybody right now. And as we talked about earlier, an Ohio State official visit is about as good as it gets. And rarely do people ever have a bad official visit. And I to me, that what's more notable, we talk about some of our favorite stories in these official visits. I like the official visits where they get brown bagged the kid. I think that was that Aaron Brown or whoever it was that they gave him like a brown bag lunch before the Texas game, I think it was, and somebody else they sent to Wendy's. I mean, that's the stuff that's more fun because we can all talk about the opulence, but when you go on an Ohio State official visit and they send you through Wendy's through the thing, that's when you know that maybe they're not as high on you as you had hoped.
Or they're just not as organized or as efficient or, again, so I hosted a kid named Jeff Byers in 2003. It was my freshman year. He came to his official visit was after the Washington game. It was the first game of my career, 2003. I didn't play. We beat Washington that night. It was a night game. It was a huge game, national TV game. And Jeff Byers was the number one player in the entire country. He was a center. He ended up going to USC. Was incredible. He's from Colorado. Great dude. And it was like, I was new to hosting, new to Ohio. So the game gets over and I got to find something for this kid to do. Cause take him out on the town. I'm like, well, by the time you get showered and you're out of the locker room and stuff on a night game, it's like 12:30, 1 o'clock. And I'm 18 and he's 17. So it's like, there's not really a ton of stuff to do when you're young, underage, and you have no idea where to go. So I went to a house party. It was absolutely terrible. We drank a couple beers. It just wasn't, it was terrible. And I was like, God, this is just awful. And it's then I was like, he goes to USC and I was like, I can't even imagine what they had dialed up for him. But it was just they just kind of hand you this kid and you're just like, what am I supposed to do with him? It's 1 o'clock at night. We're starving to death. There's nowhere to eat. I don't really have hey, let's take him through somewhere to eat or take him out, somewhere. Or I didn't even know campus yet because I hadn't even moved into the dorms because we were still living in a hotel because that's how it used to be. Because back when we were on quarters, we didn't even move to our dorms until the second or third game. We were living in a hotel for the first 2 or 3 games and the freshmen were, and it was just terrible. So I didn't know my way around campus. And, I was just like, oh my God, this is how we treat the number one player in the country. And he had a nice career, didn't get drafted, but he played in the NFL for a couple years, had a bunch of injuries, but it was just funny, where you see how it used to be versus how it is now. And then the next year I volunteered to host every single weekend that we had a recruit that needed a host because you get per diem. You get a couple $100 per diem to take the kid out. And, it's I would, do, whatever you don't spend, you get to keep. So, you can take the kid out, buy him some food, whatever. But, you also get to go out and eat nice meals too. So if you volunteer to be the host, you get to go to the steakhouse or go play arcade games or whatever. So that's kind of a fringe benefit is how do you get per diem and you get to eat these awesome meals for free, which if you don't volunteer, then you don't get to go to the awesome meals. So I was all about the free meals, man, especially when they were good. Instead of eating dorm food, I was about that life. So you got any comments on that? Does that surprise you at all? Probably not.
Well, yeah, I always wonder why we lost Jeff Byers, man. I thought we were the leader in the clubhouse, but now I know.
Oh, God.
Can you imagine, now it'd be they'd have it set up where after the game, they'd take you directly to some restaurant that would stay open and provide you with food.
Yeah.
Everything would be completely dialed in. Instead, I've got this visions of you kind of wandering around the streets of Columbus, looking for a Donato's or someplace that's open and driving through. And that had to be, that's the most pathetic story that I've ever heard.
Oh, dude, it was awful. It was terrible. You'd think that you'd have some, hey, we're going to take all the official visit kids to this steakhouse that we got open late and they're going to have steaks or they're going to have food catered in or have a nice meal. And it's no, it's here's this kid, here's $40, go find food. I'm so what? I got to go find a Taco Bell to take this poor kid to who's starving to death. And, his mom, his mom and dad or whoever go off with the coaches and they go have cocktails and, whatever the hell they eat. But like, I just have like, however my pocket change that they give me in per diem to feed this kid. And I'm like, I don't know where to go. I don't know campus at all. Cause like when I showed up to Ohio State, it was August 5th. I moved into the hotel and that was it. Like, I mean, the hotel was like, I didn't have a car, so I didn't know campus. I never left the hotel unless, the little hotel dude would drive us up to, me and Dave Patterson would go to like Polaris Mall, walk around, shop, eat some food, go to Quaker Steak, whatever. But like, neither of us had a car. So it was like the hotel shuttle guy felt bad for us and would drive us like to the mall so we could get out of there for a little bit. But, it was sad because I'm like, dude, like I didn't know how to get a shuttle. Like I didn't know how, cause like on official visits, normally have a car service to call and pick you up. And I didn't know how to do it, man. And now I see what they do now where they have, they have a fleet of like Denali's driving around to pick kids up. And it's just so much more dialed in than it used to be. And our recruiting staff is like 20 times the number of people, literally. Like we used to be one guy, now it's like 20 people that kind of get everything dialed in. So, on a weekend like this past weekend where they only had 4 kids on an official, like it's going to be really dialed up, So I don't know. Ohio State's come a long way, thank God. Because you wonder why like we couldn't land some of these mega recruits and national recruits just because we didn't know what we were doing, and we didn't have put the effort into it. We didn't have the staff for it, and Urban flipped the script on that, man, because he saw how we did our visits, and I think he was appalled compared to what he was used to at Florida. And the one great thing about Urban is whatever Urban wanted, he got, and there was no him hawing around about it because Urban. He was like, if Mick Jagger has a rider for his concerts where it says, I need 65 grilled chicken breasts and 700 pieces of broccoli and 1,000 Mentos that are, stacked on top of each other, then that's the rider he's going to get, or else he's not going to show up. And that's how Urban was. So, but yeah, it's crazy. But I'm going to get into some of Matayo's film because, we could go here for a long time talking about this stuff. So let's get some of Matayo's film. But does any of that surprise you, Nevada? I mean, you know how we used to operate back in the olden days.
Well, it just, again, you mentioned it, but, thank goodness for Urban Meyer. Thank goodness for Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer had gone up in some of the greatest recruiting battles of all time. He knew how to recruit, and, he took it up, 5 levels, and Dave's just taking it up from there. So, we're finally on a par with those other schools, and that's, thank goodness for that. But it is kind of embarrassing to think about how unorganized we were. And like I said, your Byers visit story is the most pathetic story in the history of recruiting. But let's get on to something better. We'll talk about Matayo.
Yeah, so this is Matayo's workout with Larry Johnson last year, and again, like traditionally back in the 5-10 years ago, like seniors would come to camp, but he's a senior this year, and he's not going to work out at Ohio State. He's already got the offer. He's already seen the place. This is last year going into his junior year, working out with LJ. They did these one-on-one private workouts. Never saw him do one-on-one pass rush. He just did his individual. I mean, extremely fluid, incredible feet. Really coached up well by the front, which is Big Dave and his brother's training company. Because I actually asked Big Dave, I was like, who coaches this kid? Because like you can tell by his hands and by his get off that he's been coached. He's not just some guy that gets down in a stance and kind of false steps and has poor technique. Like, I mean, you can tell that this kid, when he's doing these drills, it's not the first time he's done these drills. And some kids, they look a lot more nervous, a lot less fluid. But this kid, I mean, I watched him. I was like, I think he might be the best player in the country, and I definitely think he's the best defensive end in the country because he has so much room to grow. But he's like 270 in these videos, and I'm like, I thought he was like 235 because you can see how he runs, how low he gets. And, he never really breaks a sweat, and he's got a lot of upside. Great kid, obviously great dad. So I'm excited about him because I think we're trending in the right way. I think we're going to get this kid. Like I said, with, the JT2 Malala thing didn't hurt that he showed up, started as a freshman, was really good. And I think he's going to be much better in Jim Knowles' system because, we watched in the spring game, that kid's got an unbelievable spin move and he wasn't even able to use it last year in the Kerry Combs defense. So I think that's going to be a huge deal. Again, I love seeing some of the crazy stuff that LJ does just to see, how they work, the swipe moves. And, it's funny how they emulate offensive linemen with having these guys with these big red hands and stuff. But we get a little bit of his game film. again, this is some stuff. I don't know how good the competition is. I mean, I think it's pretty decent, but he's a force. And again, like JT, I think he'd be a great tight end too. But I'm not sure if he's trying to hear that. But I think he'd be a fantastic tight end just because his body type and his fluidity and his athleticism. So, what have you seen so far in this tape, Nevada?
Well, like you said, you're getting a very polished kid. You're getting a kid that's really been coached up well. Obviously, he's a big physical specimen. The level of play is really high that he's in. I mean, it's some of the best in Southern California. Yeah. So, I mean, it's you're getting there's a reason why he's so highly regarded, and a kid like him. I mean, you never like to say can't miss, but I think he's as close to a surefire thing as you're going to get in recruiting. And Ohio State's in as good a position as they could possibly be. They've been the leader for quite some time. And I think this visit did nothing but kind of reinforce that. And I think this is ultimately a kid that Ohio State's going to get.
Yeah, and I think that, his brother, is a star at Clemson, played early. So I think that, him and his family are used to the limelight. They're used to, he had that huge NIL deal with Dr. Pepper last year. So I think that, he's conditioned to be used to the limelight that's going to happen when he comes to Ohio State. And I mean, I think he's a day one, if he's not a starter, he's a high-end rotation guy. He's like that 50 lineman. I don't think he's a guy you can really keep off the field. So I really am excited about this kid because I think he'd be a wonderful addition to Ohio State. And again, I think LJ's got a little more gas in the tank than people give him credit for because I think he looks – he's energetic. It helps when your room is good. Because that super sophomore group of Jack Sawyer, JT2, Malawau, Tyleek, Williams, and Mike Hall, they're only sophomores. So, I mean, you at least got one more year with those guys. So those guys are like fantastic players. So that would give me a little more juice. And plus, if you look at what his salary is, I mean, to be a D-line coach, I mean, he's maybe the highest paid D-line coach in the country that has no coordinator title. So, when you see how these salaries are skyrocketing and you love what you do and you've got a loaded room, it makes it a little easier to hang on for 3 or 4 more years, especially if you get a kid like this. I mean, it's you get a kid like Matayo, man, it's going to be hard to ever, give up. Cause I think he's a 3-and-out kind of kid. And I think his upside is severe, just like JT2 Malawau was. So, any closing words about it? This was a great show. It's hilarious talking about some of the official visit stuff, but, any closing words for our Buckeyes Scoop viewers?
No, I just think I think it's a really good point about Larry. I think Larry going into last year, this was probably going to be one of his last year, if not his last year. And I think the restructuring that Day has done on the defensive side of the ball, and we don't need to denigrate anybody else, but I think that's re-energized Larry. It's kind of put him in a better position. I feel like he feels the defense is a little bit more cohesive, and I think that might keep him around a little bit longer, and that's only going to benefit Ohio State, so that's good news all the way around.
Yeah, and I think some of Jim Knowles' things he does in the pass rush where he frees up the defensive ends to do more than just rush the outside shoulder and hold contain, where these guys can actually, be creative. These guys, these defensive ends are like artists, and it's you don't want to chain them up and make them color between the lines every single time. These guys want to be able to spin and bull. And, it's like when they have a 3-way go on every single pass rush because of what Jim Knowles does. And he has his linebackers and his extra safety kind of cover them up, based on where they go. That's a huge deal. When you watch Jack Sawyer and JT2 Malawau spin, and I'm like, those guys weren't even allowed to do that last year. And their spins are fantastic. I used to mark guys that could actually spin when I would be, studying pass rushes, getting ready for games. And a great spin move is very hard to defend. And Jack and JT both have fantastic spin moves. So that's something I look for. I think that's going to be something that's really going to up our pass rush proficiency. And I'm looking forward to that. And, I think that, when LJ tells these DNs that, hey, you guys can truly get after the quarterback now, I think that that'll re-energize him and re-energize that room because those kids, they want to get to the quarterback. And, when you've got a great move like a spin move, it'd be like if you had Dwight Freeney not spin. It'd be crazy. So, or Von Miller, like the top guys like that. So it's been a great show. Appreciate you, Nevada. I'm going to close this thing out. So thank you guys so much. This has been an awesome show. We've had an incredible run recently of our content. Like I said, we've got We're the highest rated show in the industry right now, which is crazy. Our views have been skyrocketing. So thank you so much. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this content. Leave me a comment. Who's your favorite recruiting story you've ever heard, or a kid that you thought we had and maybe we didn't have as great of a visit, that you wish we could redo the visit under Urban and Ryan Day. But leave me some feedback. I love reading your feedback. I respond to every single comment. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much, Buckeye Scoop family. Thank you, Buckeye Nation. Never been a better time to subscribe to BuckeyeScoop.com. We are the #1 Ohio State premium message board in existence right now. We are growing like a weed. It's been fantastic, and I cannot thank you and our community enough. So thank you, Buckeye Nation. You guys have a great day. Go Bucks.